Who is that woman, and why is she sitting in our seats? My brother Daniel whispered the question, but I heard the tremble in his voice. We were standing at the back of the funeral home watching a blonde woman in a black dress settle into the front pew with 3 children, a teenage girl, a boy around 12, and a little one who couldn't have been more than 6. They were crying. Loudly. Dramatically. Like they had lost someone they loved. But my father had only loved us. Hadn't he? Drop a comment and let me know where you re-listening from and what time it is for you right now. I'd love to know who's part of this community. My name is Josephine Hartwell. I'm 32 years old. And the day I buried my father was the day I learned that the man I had idolized my entire life was a stranger wearing a mask I had never seen behind. Let me start at the beginning. My father, Richard Hartwell, was a legend in our small town of Pemberton, Ohio. He was a self-made man, born poor, worked his way through night school, built a construction company from nothing. Hartwell & Sons Construction. The sign hung over every job site in 3 counties. By the time I was born, my father employed over 200 people and was worth more money than anyone in Pemberton had ever seen. But he never acted rich. That was what everyone loved about him. He drove a 10-year-old pickup truck. He wore the same steel-toed boots to job sites that he'd worn when he was a laborer. He knew every employee by name, remembered their children's birthdays, showed up at their weddings and funerals. When the factory on the edge of town closed and 200 families lost their income, my father hired as many of them as he could. When the Methodist Church needed a new roof, he did the work for free. Richard Hartwell was the best man in Pemberton, Ohio. Everyone said so. He was also my hero. From the time I was a little girl, I wanted to be exactly like him. When other kids played house, I played construction site. When other teenagers dreamed of prom dresses, I was learning to read blueprints at my father's office. He used to take me to job sites on Saturday mornings, put a hard hat on my head, and introduce me to his workers as my little engineer. "This one's going places," he would say, his hand heavy and warm on my shoulder. "She's got the Hartwell work ethic." I believed him. I believed everything he said. My brother Daniel was different. He was the heir apparent, the son who would take over the company, the one my father groomed for leadership. But I never felt lesser because of it. My father made sure of that. He told me constantly that I could do anything, be anything, that being a woman was an advantage because I would see things the men missed. "The secret to this business," he said once, "is paying attention to details everyone else ignores. You've got that gift, Josie. Don't ever let anyone take it from you." I spent my whole life trying to live up to those words. I got straight A's in school. I went to Ohio State and studied business. I graduated magna cum laude. I got a job at a marketing firm in Columbus and worked my way up to account director by the time I was 30. Everything I did to make him proud. And the whole time, he was living another life. A secret life. A life with another woman and 3 children who called him daddy. The same word I used. My mother, Virginia, was his high school sweetheart. They had been together since they were 16 years old, married at 19, parents at 22. She had supported him through every struggle, every setback, every triumph. She had raised 3 children while he built his empire. She had stood beside him at every ribbon cutting, every charity gala, every community event. She had loved him for 43 years. And he had been lying to her for at least 18 of them. The funeral was held at St. Michael's Catholic Church, the same church where my parents had been married. My father had died of a heart attack 3 days earlier, sudden, unexpected, no warning. He had been at a job site in Columbus, checking on a project, when he collapsed. Dead before the ambulance arrived. My mother was devastated. We all were. Richard Hartwell was only 64 years old. He was supposed to have decades left. He was supposed to walk me down the aisle at my wedding next spring. He was supposed to meet his grandchildren. He was supposed to grow old with my mother, the way they had always planned. Instead, he was lying in a mahogany casket at the front of St. Michael's, and a woman none of us had ever seen was weeping over him like a widow. "I'll handle this," my brother Daniel muttered. He started toward the front of the church, but my mother grabbed his arm. "Don't. Mom, those people are in our seats. This is Dad's funeral. They have no right," I said. "Don't." My mother's voice was ice. Her face was pale, controlled, absolutely still. "Not here. Not now. We will deal with this later." She walked past us, her back straight, her chin high, and took a seat in the second pew. Daniel and I exchanged a look of confusion and followed her. The entire service, I couldn't stop staring at the back of that woman's head. Her blonde hair was perfectly styled. Her children sat quietly beside her, the oldest girl holding the youngest boy's hand. They looked normal. Like any family grieving a loss. But they weren't any family. They were my father's family. A family that wasn't supposed to exist. When the priest invited people to share memories of Richard Hartwell, the blonde woman stood up. My mother's hand clamped down on my wrist. My name is Sandra Brennan, the woman said, her voice thick with tears. Richard and we were together for 18 years. He was the love of my life. He was a wonderful father to our children, Madison, Tyler, and little Jacob. She gestured to the 3 kids, who all looked at her with red-rimmed eyes. He used to say that family was everything to him. And he meant it. He gave us everything. We will miss him more than words can say. She sat down. The church was absolutely silent. 200 people, all holding their breath, all staring at my mother. Virginia Hartwell did not move. Did not speak. Did not cry. She simply sat there, her hand crushing my wrist, while the priest awkwardly cleared his throat and moved on to the next speaker. After the service, Sandra Brennan tried to approach us. Virginia, she said, reaching out a hand. I'm so sorry. I know this must be, don't. My mother's voice could have frozen steel. Don't speak to me. Don't speak to my children. You are not welcome here. Sandra's face crumpled. He loved you too, you know. He talked about you all the time. He said, I don't care what he said. My husband is dead. And apparently, so is the man I thought I knew. My mother turned and walked out of the church. Daniel and I followed, leaving Sandra Brennan standing alone with her 3 children and 200 pairs of staring eyes. The reading of the will was scheduled for 2 days after the funeral. We gathered in the conference room of Morrison & Pierce, the law firm that had handled my father's affairs for 30 years. My mother sat at the head of the table, wearing black, her face a mask of composure that I knew was hiding a volcano of pain. Daniel sat beside her, his jaw tight, his hands clenched. I sat across from them, my fiancé Marcus beside me for support. We expected it to be straightforward. My father had always told us that everything would go to my mother, with provisions for the 3 of us after she passed. The house, the company, the investments, all of it was supposed to stay in the family. The Hartwell family. The only family we knew about. Then Sandra Brennan walked in. She was alone this time, no children. She wore a navy blue dress and minimal makeup. She looked tired. Broken. She took a seat at the far end of the table, as far from my mother as possible. What is she doing here? Daniel demanded. Harold Pierce, the senior partner, cleared his throat. Ms. Brennan was specifically named in Mr. Hartwell's will. She has a legal right to be present for the reading. This is insane. Daniel. My mother's voice cut through his protest. Let the man read the will. Harold Pierce opened a folder. He looked at each of us in turn, his expression apologetic. Before I begin, I want to say that I had no knowledge of the contents of this document until after Mr. Hartwell's death. He kept it sealed, with instructions that it only be opened upon his passing. What I am about to read may be difficult to hear. He began. I, Richard Thomas Hartwell, being of sound mind and body, do hereby declare this to be my last will and testament, superseding all previous wills and codicils. The first few paragraphs were standard legal language. Then came the bequests. To my wife, Virginia Marie Hartwell, I leave the family home at 847 Maple Street, Pemberton, Ohio, along with its contents, in recognition of our 43 years of marriage and her unwavering support. My mother nodded slightly. This was expected. To my son, Daniel Richard Hartwell, I leave a 35% ownership stake in Hartwell & Sons Construction, along with the position of president and CEO, which he has earned through years of dedicated service. Daniel exhaled. This was also expected. He had been working at the company since college, preparing to take over. To my daughter, Josephine Grace Hartwell, I leave a 15% ownership stake in Hartwell & Sons Construction, along with a cash bequest of $500,000, to be used toward the purchase of a home or any other purpose she sees fit. I felt Marcus squeeze my hand. $500,000. It was more than I had expected, but I wasn't thinking about money. I was watching Harold Pierce's face, watching the way he hesitated before continuing. To Sandra Marie Brennan, my partner of 18 years and the mother of 3 of my children, I leave the following. Partner. Mother of 3 of my children. My mother made a sound, a small, strangled gasp, like someone had punched her in the stomach. Daniel stood up so fast his chair fell over. Harold Pierce continued reading, his voice steady despite the chaos. I leave Sandra Marie Brennan the property at 2847 Lakeside Drive, Columbus, Ohio, which has been her primary residence for the past 15 years, along with its contents. I leave her a 25% ownership stake in Hartwell & Sons Construction, to be held in trust for our children until the youngest reaches the age of 25. I leave her a cash bequest of $2 million, to be used for the education and care of our children. 25%. Sandra Brennan, a woman none of us had ever heard of, now owned a quarter of my father's company. But Harold Pierce wasn't done. To my daughter Madison Elaine Brennan, age 17, I leave a trust fund of $500,000, to be released upon her graduation from college or her 25th birthday, whichever comes first. Son. Daughter. My father had another daughter. To my son Tyler Richard Brennan, age 12, I leave a trust fund of $500,000, under the same terms. My father had another son. Tyler Richard. He had given him the same middle name as Daniel. To my son Jacob Thomas Brennan, age 6, I leave a trust fund of $500,000, under the same terms. 3 children. My father had 3 other children. A complete second family that he had maintained for 18 years while coming home to us every night, while sitting at our dinner table, while telling us he loved us. Daniel's voice was shaking. This is fraud. This can't be legal. He was married to our mother. Those children are illegitimate. They can't inherit. I'm afraid they can, Mr. Hartwell. Harold Pierce's voice was gentle but firm. Ohio law does not distinguish between legitimate and illegitimate children when it comes to inheritance. Mr. Hartwell specifically and legally acknowledged all 3 children in this document. The will is valid. He was having an affair for 18 years. He was a bigamist. He was not legally married to Ms. Brennan. Therefore, there was no bigamy. What there was a long-term relationship conducted outside his marriage. Morally reprehensible, perhaps. But not illegal. And certainly not grounds to contest the will. My mother stood up. Everyone stopped talking. She walked to the end of the table, where Sandra Brennan was sitting with tears streaming down her face. She stood over her for a long moment, looking down. 18 years, my mother said quietly. I was married to that man for 43 years. I gave him everything. I raised his children. I built his home. I was there for every success and every failure. And for 18 of those years, nearly half my marriage, he was with you. Sandra looked up at her. Virginia, I'm so sorry. Don't apologize to me. You knew he was married. You knew he had a family. You chose to be the other woman for 18 years. You bore him 3 children knowing that he would never leave me for you. You accepted that arrangement. Sandra's face crumpled. He said he loved me. He said it was complicated. He said, he lied. My mother's voice was flat. He lied to both of us. He lied to everyone. The only difference is that you knew about me, and I didn't know about you. So don't sit there and pretend we're the same. We're not. She turned and walked out of the conference room. I followed her. Daniel followed me. Marcus brought up the rear, looking shell-shocked. In the elevator, my mother finally broke. She leaned against the wall, pressed her hands to her face, and sobbed. Deep, wrenching sobs that shook her entire body. 43 years of love, trust, and devotion, shattered by a few paragraphs in a legal document. I held her. Daniel held her. We held each other while the elevator descended, while the world we thought we knew crumbled around us. The weeks after the funeral were chaos. Daniel tried to contest the will. Our lawyers told him it was hopeless. The document was airtight, properly witnessed, and clearly reflected my father's intentions. The only grounds for challenge would be if we could prove he was mentally incapacitated when he wrote it, and he had been reviewed by a doctor 2 months before his death and declared in perfect mental health. My father had planned this. Carefully, deliberately, methodically. He had known exactly what would happen when he died. He had known his secret would be exposed. And he had made sure that Sandra Brennan and her children would be protected. Protected from us. I went to see her. 3 weeks after the funeral, without telling my mother or Daniel. The house on Lakeside Drive was beautiful. A colonial-style home on a quiet street, with a manicured lawn and a tire swing in the front yard. The kind of house my father would have liked. The kind of house where he would have felt at home. Sandra opened the door. She looked surprised to see me. Josephine. Can I come in? She hesitated, then stepped aside. The interior was warm, comfortable, filled with family photos. I saw my father in almost every frame. My father holding a newborn, Madison, probably. My father at a Little League game, cheering from the stands. My father on a beach somewhere, building sandcastles with 2 small children. He looked happy. Really, genuinely happy. It made me want to scream. Why are you here? Sandra asked. I need to understand. I need to know how this happened. I need to know who my father really was. Sandra sat down heavily on the couch. She looked older than she had at the funeral, like the past few weeks had aged her decades. I met Richard in 2006. At a conference in Chicago. I was a sales rep for a building materials company. He was there to negotiate a bulk contract. She smiled sadly. He was charming. Funny. So confident. He made me feel like I was the only person in the room. He was married. I know. He told me on our second date. Said he loved his wife but that something was missing. Said he felt like he was living someone else's life. Said that when he was with me, he felt like himself for the first time in years. I felt sick. And you believed him. I loved him. I know that sounds pathetic to you. I know I was the other woman, the homewrecker, the villain in your family story. But I loved him, Josephine. I loved him for 18 years. I gave him 3 children. I built a life with him, a partial life, a secret life, but a life. Did you ever ask him to leave my mother? Sandra shook her head. Once. Early on. He said he couldn't. Said it would destroy her, destroy you kids, destroy everything he had built. He said he loved her too, differently than he loved me, but genuinely. He said he had enough love for 2 families. That's not how love works. I know that now. I knew it then, probably. But I wanted to believe him. I wanted what he was offering, the weekends, the holidays he could steal, the vacations we took under the guise of business trips. I convinced myself it was enough. Was it? Sandra looked at me, her eyes wet. No. It was never enough. But it was all I had. She paused, wiping her tears with the back of her hand. You want to know the worst part? He was a good father. To my kids, I mean. He was there for their birthdays. He'd tell your mother he had a conference in Cleveland or Detroit. And he'd spend the whole weekend with us. He coached Tyler's Little League team for 2 seasons. He helped Madison with her college applications. He read bedtime stories to Jacob every night he was here. Every night he was here, I repeated. How often was that? 2, 3 times a week sometimes. Weekends when he could manage it. He had a whole system, business trips, late meetings, client dinners. Your mother never questioned it because she trusted him. Because Richard Hartwell was the most trustworthy man in Pemberton, Ohio. The bitterness in her voice surprised me. I had expected her to defend him. You're angry at him. Of course I'm angry at him. He promised me things, Josephine. He said that when his kids were grown, when the business was stable, he would figure out a way for us to be together openly. He said it for 18 years. And then he died, and I found out that he never intended to keep that promise. He just wanted to keep both of us forever. How do you know he never intended to keep it? Sandra laughed, a hollow, broken sound. Because his will leaves the house to your mother. If he had ever planned to leave her, he would have put that house in a trust, would have protected it somehow. But he didn't. Because your mother was always going to be his wife. I was always going to be his secret. I stayed for 2 hours. I met Madison, who was 17 and looked so much like my father it hurt. She had his eyes, his stubborn chin, his way of standing with her arms crossed when she was thinking. When she shook my hand, her grip was firm, a Hartwell handshake, my father would have called it. I always knew about you, she said quietly. Dad showed me pictures. He said you were brilliant and that I should try to be like you. I didn't know what to say to that. My father had used me as a role model for his secret daughter. He had held me up as an example while lying to me about her very existence. I'm sorry you're in this position, I finally managed. I'm sorry too. She looked down at her feet. I used to be so jealous of you. You got to have him all the time. You got to go to family dinners and holidays and everyone knew you were his daughter. I had to keep it secret. I couldn't even tell my friends who my father was. That must have been awful. It was. But at least I knew the truth. You didn't know anything. That might be worse. I met Tyler, who had his mannerisms, his way of tilting his head when he listened. He shook my hand solemnly and told me he was sorry about my loss. 12 years old, and he was already learning to navigate adult grief. Dad talked about you a lot, Tyler said. He said you were the smartest person he knew. He said you were going to change the world someday. Every word was a knife in my chest. My father had bragged about me to his other children while hiding them from me. He had built 2 families on a foundation of lies and somehow convinced himself that love made it acceptable. I met Jacob, who was 6 years old and didn't fully understand that his daddy was never coming back. He showed me his toy trucks, construction trucks, of course, just like daddy's, and asked me if I wanted to play. They were just kids. They hadn't asked for any of this. They had loved their father the same way I had loved mine, completely, innocently, without knowing the truth. I couldn't hate them. I tried, but I couldn't. Sandra was harder. But even with her, the hatred faded over time. She was a woman who had made terrible choices, yes. But she had also been manipulated by a man who was a master at making people believe what he wanted them to believe. My father. The liar. The fraud. The man who had 2 families and never seemed to suffer for it. I went home that night and told my mother everything. She listened in silence. When I finished, she was quiet for a long time. Your father was a coward, she finally said. He wanted everything, the respectable family, the secret lover, the children on both sides. He wanted to be the hero of 2 stories. And he got away with it because he died before anyone could hold him accountable. What do we do now? We survive. We move forward. We don't let his lies define us. She paused. And we don't punish those children for their father's sins. They're innocent, Josephine. As innocent as you were. It's been 2 years since my father's funeral. The company survived. Daniel runs it now, working alongside the trust that holds Sandra's 25% stake. It's awkward, uncomfortable, and nothing like what any of us imagined. But the business is still profitable, still employing 200 people, still the backbone of Pemberton's economy. My mother sold the house on Maple Street. She said she couldn't live with the ghosts anymore, the memories of a marriage that was half lie. She bought a condo in Florida, near her sister, and she's slowly rebuilding her life. She goes to therapy. She takes watercolor classes. She's learning to be Virginia again, not just Richard's wife. She's never spoken to Sandra Brennan. I don't think she ever will. Some wounds are too deep to heal with conversation. But I have. I visit Columbus twice a year now. I have lunch with Madison, who's in college studying architecture, like her father, like mine. I send birthday cards to Tyler and Jacob. I've become, in some strange and unexpected way, their older sister. Not because I forgave Sandra. Not because I've made peace with what my father did. But because those children didn't choose this life. They didn't choose to be secrets. They didn't choose to be revealed at a funeral, to have their entire existence treated like a scandal. They're my siblings. Half-siblings, technically, but siblings. And family, real family, doesn't punish children for their parents' mistakes. I got married last fall. Marcus and I had a small ceremony, just 50 people, in a garden outside Columbus. My mother walked me down the aisle. Both of us had agreed that she would take the place my father should have held. She wore a soft blue dress and cried when she handed me off to Marcus. "Your father would have been proud," she whispered. "The real parts of him, anyway. The parts that actually loved you." It was the kindest thing she could have said. Daniel stood beside Marcus as a groomsman. He had come a long way in 2 years, from rage and denial to something like acceptance. He still didn't talk to Sandra, but he had started sending birthday cards to the kids. Small steps. And in the third row, sitting quietly with her children, was Sandra Brennan. Madison wore a green dress and took photos the whole time. Tyler sat up straight and paid attention like he was studying the ceremony for future reference. Jacob fell asleep on Sandra's lap during the vows, exhausted from the excitement. My mother didn't acknowledge her. She didn't have to. But she also didn't ask me to uninvite her. The night before the wedding, when I told her that Sandra and the kids would be attending, she had been quiet for a long time. "Those children are your family," she finally said. "I don't have to like their mother. I don't have to forgive your father. But I won't ask you to pretend they don't exist. That's what Richard did. I won't make his mistake." She understood that those kids had a right to be there, to see their sister get married, to be part of a family they never asked to be hidden from. My father would have hated it. The two halves of his carefully compartmentalized life, sitting in the same room, seeing each other as human beings instead of secrets to be kept. Good. He doesn't get to control the narrative anymore. He's dead. And the people he lied to, all of us, on both sides, are still here, still living, still trying to make sense of the wreckage he left behind. I used to think my father was the best man I knew. I used to think he was honest, honorable, worthy of the legacy he built. Now I know the truth. He was a liar who happened to do some good things. He was a fraud who genuinely loved his children, all 6 of us. He was a coward who built 2 beautiful families and didn't have the courage to be honest with either one. I miss him. That's the hardest part. Despite everything, I miss him. I miss the father who taught me to ride a bike, who cheered at my graduation, who cried when I got engaged. I miss the version of him that I thought was real. But I don't mourn him anymore. I mourn the relationship we could have had if he had been brave enough to tell the truth. I mourn the honest father I deserved but never had. And I look at Madison and Tyler and Jacob, and I see the same mourning in their eyes. They lost him too. They lost the fantasy of who they thought he was. We're all orphans of the same lie. If you re-listening to this and you discovered a family secret that shattered everything you thought you knew, about a parent, a spouse, a sibling, I want you to know something. The secret is not your fault. The lies are not your responsibility. The broken pieces are not yours to glue back together. You are allowed to grieve. You are allowed to be angry. You are allowed to never forgive if that's what you need. But you are also allowed to choose a different path than the one that was forced on you. You are allowed to build new relationships out of the rubble. You are allowed to find family in unexpected places. My father's secret destroyed the family I thought I had. But it also gave me 3 siblings I never knew existed. It gave me a new understanding of my mother's strength. It gave me the clarity to see that love isn't about perfection, it's about showing up honestly, even when it's hard. Richard Hartwell couldn't do that. But I can. And I will. Every single day, for the rest of my life. If this story resonated with you, hit that like button and share it with someone who needs to hear it. And remember, the secrets people keep don't define who you are. Only your choices define that. My father took his secrets to the grave. But his children, all 6 of us, are still here. And we're writing a better story.